So once we are calling this, we are calling it with the value of 4. T1 is going to be T2, that is 1, and T1 plus T2 is going to be 1. So it is going to call with the parameters 4, 1, and 1. Right. So as we said, 4, 1, and 1. It is going to call it. It hasn't called it yet. So let's say that this function is called, and forget that this is the same function. Imagine this is a separate function. Once this function finishes, where would it come back? Would it come back to the first point here, or would it come back here?
Underneath it then.
It would come back at 10, right? It won't go back at this point here. So we call this function. Now this function is going to be called with 312. Okay, it calls 312. Then it calls with 223, 135, and 058. It is going to call now with 058. It is going to call it with 058. What will this call result in? It will result in that return statement. After it has returned from this call, it would come to line number 10. It is not going to go back up to line number 6 and then call this function again, because it has done all that. The only point that it was stuck is because this was a recursive call at this point that it kept on looping. But once it is done, now it is coming back from that point onwards, right? So it is going to print out this thing now, the next line in the code. Because as far as it is concerned, this line of code has executed. So if we go inside again, we have 0, 5, and 8. We come to this return statement. That is fine. So this return statement basically says I'm done. So this is still in, up to this point here. It would just come out here. And then it's basically returning back. And it says this was the line that we were executing here. It's come back with the original values of 1, 3, and 5. But it is not going to call it again. It is going to move on to the next line. Okay.
So why does it print A many times?
Come again?
Why does it print A many times after the...
It prints A 5 times because there are 5 levels. And it is coming out of those 5 levels, and each time it is coming out of those 5 levels, it is printing out whatever's remaining here, and then goes out, comes back again here, goes out. So I've placed 3 breakpoints. One breakpoint is, the first breakpoint is within this thing. So if it reaches this return statement, it would stop there. The other breakpoint is in this function. When I'm calling this function, the other breakpoint is this cout statement. Okay. And I'm going to start this thing. So let's just restart it again. So I'm currently at this main program here where I'm going to call this function first. Fibonacci forward recursive n T1 and T2. Now of these 3 breakpoints at line 7, line 9, and line 10, where do you think, which breakpoint do you think it will stop? Will it stop at line 7? If I run this code now, will it stop at line 7?
Yes.
Why?
Because that's its first point that it would stop.
Yes, but this line 7 is within this if condition, right? So line 7 will never get executed. So it would go to line 9, right? Okay, so this is the first line that it comes to. And it goes to a function call, prints this, goes to a function, prints this, calls itself again, prints this, calls itself again, prints this, calls itself again, fine. And now it catches on to line number 7, because that is the return statement. Now, once we have this, it is going to return out, right? But it is going to return to the previous level. The previous level where the value of n was 1, value of t1 was 5, the value of t1 was 3, and value of t2 was 5. Now, what happened in this previous level? The previous level was we were calling this function and it has returned. So after the function returns, what is the next statement that you execute? The next lines of that function, right? So forget that this was a recursive call, right? Forget that this was a recursive call, forget that this was a recursive call. Let's say that this was any other function call. If this was any other function call, after this function has returned, it would then come out to the cout A statement, won't it?
Yes.
Okay, so if it does come out to the cout A statement, at this level is 135. Now, what will it do? It has printed out 0, 1 and the 5 Fibonacci numbers, so 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Now this cout A statement means that it is going to print out the value of A, right? So if it is printing out the value of A, after it has printed out the value of A the first time, it is the function body is done. And what happens if we do not have a return statement? Let's say it is some void function. It does not have a return statement like the previous example that we had, that n equals to n minus 10. It did not have a return statement. Once it has finished that off, let's say that once it has done that, it is going to print A, come to that curly braces thing, and then this would mean that, okay, now return back again, right? So when it's going to return back, where is it going to return now? Is it going to return to main, or has main called it? In this level where we are in level 5, where we have the T1 and T2 values are 1, 3, and 5. Has main called this function?
No.
No. A previous version of Fibonacci forward recursive has called this function. So it is going to return back to that level, right? Level 4, where n, T1 and T2 are 2, 2, and 3. So it has printed out A first, and then it returns back to this level here, where it is 2, 2, and 3. Comes out of this function and then prints out A again. Same thing as before, it now returns back to the level that it had called, that was used to call this thing. So the level where the values are 3, 1, and 2. Comes back out here with the level at 3, 1, and 2. Prints out A again. Finishes of this function, comes back out, but where does it go to? The previous level, level 2, where the values are 4, 1, and 1. Prints out A again. Where does it go to again? 4, 1, and 1 is still not being called by main. Remember, main called it with the values 5, 0, and 1. After that initial call, all of the other calls were done by itself. It comes out to that level where it has the values of 5, 0, and 1, prints out A again. Now, this was the level when main called it, right? Now, where should it go? Should it now go to line number 10 again, or should it now go to line number 31?
31 if it's back in main.
That is back in main. And now finally it comes out to line number 30. So that is what's going on when we look at this step through, right? It prints out 0, 1 initially, and then it prints, calls itself with 5, 0, and 1, prints the value, calls again with n equals to 4, prints the value, calls again with n equals to 3, then again another call with n equals 2, another call with n equals 1, finally another call with n equals 0, which returns, because it is a base case, it returns back to the previous level. Once it has returned back to the previous level, it then prints out A, returns back to the previous level, prints out A again, returns back, prints out A again, then prints out A again, then prints out A again. It basically follows the same calling route to return back using in that same route, right? And remember, each time it is returning, the previous values are still being maintained. So at this level here, where it prints out A here, so individual of these are different levels, right? So at this level, n is 0. But at this level here, it had called with n equals to 0. But at this level here, n was 2 because we are calling with n equals to 1. But let's say that n is 1. So at this level here, the previous values of n, t1 and t2 remain. At this level here, n is 2, t1 is 2, t2 is 3. At this level here, n is 3, t1 and t2 are 1 and 2. Because once it returns, anything that we did in the internal levels does not matter because they are all local scope. We come back, once we come back from a function call, our local variables are still there with their original values. Now tell me about confusions now. Okay. Now let me ask you then, since everyone has totally understood recursion completely or nobody's cares anymore, so I'll ask you this question as OK was asking. This program, you will see that it prints out so this program has two print statements, right? One is print out the current value of t1 plus t2. One is print out the current, print out A, just the character A. Why are all the A values at the end? Why is it not printing something as 1A, 2A, 3A, 5A, 8A? Why is it printing 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, then printing A?
Because it has to meet its base condition first.
It has to, because this cout A statement is after the recursive call. So because of that, it has to reach the base condition first, and then while it is returning back, it keeps on printing out A. Right, so there are two steps here. One print statement is above the recursive call, another print statement is after the recursive call. Everything that is above the recursive call happens first, then we move on to the recursive